Breaking news. Imaging resource is dead, but someone is buying and rescuing DPReview. We'll tell you who. Sony is going to begin offering paid firmware, even for their high-end cameras, and people are pretty mad about it. And we have 3 leaks: a new amazing telephoto lens on the next iPhone, a new Canon mirrorless lens, and the Leica Q3 has been leaked. I'll tell you all about it, but first I want to thank our sponsor, Squarespace. See, squarespace.com/Tony is where you start when you have a business idea, when you have a new personal project, or really anything you want to share on the web, including your photography or video portfolio. You can get your own custom domain and set up a professional website off of social media where you control the branding, the colors, the design. You make it all yourself and you own it. Start today at squarespace.com/Tony, and free trial, no credit card required. When you love it, the coupon code Tony gets you 10% off. Thank you, Squarespace. Our top story: Imaging Resource is completely gone. Imaging Resource was a massive website, an incredible resource for photographers that you probably visited without even knowing it. I came across it all the time. If I was just searching for the buffering capacity of some random camera, Imaging Resource would come up because they had a team of people testing every single camera that came out in minute detail. I got to know all those guys, including the founder, Dave Eschels, personally. And I'm amazed that it's gone. I'm stunned that it's gone. This has moved me just about as much as the loss of DPReview. Here's a timeline of Imaging Resource. It was started in April of 1998 by Dave Eschels, and everything went great. For about 21 years, he rode the wave of digital photography that peaked in like 2012 or so. But then, as smartphones started to take over and camera manufacturers started to cut back their budgets, he was also hit. They got a lot of advertising money from the camera companies themselves, like Nikon and Canon, and when they reduced or shifted their marketing budget in the second half of 2019, Eschels decided he just had to close it down. Fortunately, he was open to buyers and he found one. Matador, who also ran Outdoor Photographer and quite a few other resources, bought Imaging Resource. So that was great news, except literally that same month, the pandemic started to hit the world and suddenly events were shut down. So sports and wedding photographers couldn't work and travel was shut down. So people weren't traveling anymore and there were no weddings, and it all impacted the photography and camera industry so much. And of course, that also impacted Imaging Resource. And so maybe it wasn't as profitable for Matador as they thought it was going to be. And in March of this year, Matador sold it off to something called the Bebop Channel Corporation, which I'll tell you about more in a little bit. And then this month in May, Bebop just unplugged Imaging Resource. At first, there wasn't even a redirect. Now it redirects to the Outdoor Photographer magazine. So who is this Bebop Channel Corporation? Well, they're based out of New York, at least based on their P.O. box. And I can see it's run by Greg and Sue Royal, and they're jazz enthusiasts. And Greg, like me, is a trombone player, except that he's clearly far more successful at it. Now, Bebop Channel Corporation has been a pretty small company with annual revenues at only about $350,000 last year. And that's top line. That's revenue, not profit. When they bought Matador, their revenues went up a massive amount, like almost 20-fold, to over $6 million a year. But as I recall, Matador's profits were only about $86,000 a year, so it wasn't a huge moneymaker and probably didn't sell for all that much. Now, Greg and Sue are jazz enthusiasts, and I think they bought Matador because they wanted the Jazz Times magazine, which is pretty successful in that field. It doesn't seem like they cared about anything else. It's really shocking that they just abruptly shut down a website with no warning. Even Dave Eschels, who was currently working on articles, didn't seem to have any warning. He said his content management system just didn't work one day. I just can't believe the callous that some people have towards a resource that's so important to the photography community. Like, even if they don't continue to make new content, people buy used camera gear all the time. And the cameras they've reviewed will continue to be used and referenced for decades. This is really important information to have, and it pains me when it just is all gone. I think this is total bullshit. And if you agree with me, send an email over to submit@beboptv.com and maybe ask them politely if they can think of the photography community and put it online. I did this several days ago, and I was hoping to bring this news piece to you with their response, but they didn't respond to me. And I just would ask that they just give the archive to somebody so we could let's just make it static and host it somewhere so we can still reference it. First, I want to tell you about Sony's firmware updates. A lot of you have written to me very upset because Sony has not been updating their flagship cameras like the Sony A1 and the Sony A7S III with features that they've been putting into their entry-level cameras. And I feel you, because we reviewed the Sony ZV-E10 and ZV-E1, and those had several features that I want in my Sony A7S III that I cannot currently get. Features like keeping two people in focus. We are often, me and Chelsea, on camera at the same time, and if one of us moves forward or back, we're out of focus. These entry-level cameras solve that problem. They also have things like product showcase, so I can hold something up to the camera and it will be in focus instead of having to hide behind it. The way we shoot, these things could completely change our workflow. There's other features that are interesting to serious filmmakers, things like de-squeezing anthropomorphic lenses, and the list goes on. And you cannot get these features in Sony's most expensive top-end cameras, and people are mad about it. And they say, Sony, give us these features. This is even more infuriating. Sony Alpha Review said somebody talked to an intoxicated Sony exec who said the firmware existed for the A1 and A7S III to give those features. Somebody had coded it, but they didn't want to distribute it because they wanted to push new camera sales and profits in their video cameras, their ZV and FX cameras. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I would believe it. That makes sense. That is how business works. They have to make money. Now, I didn't even feel like I needed to cover this story originally because I wasn't mad at Sony for not giving me those firmware updates. After all, I bought the camera I bought. It had all the features they promised it would have. Adding new features for free would definitely make me happy, but I didn't have the expectation that any new features and new cameras were going to be matched in the flagship. That has never existed. There's always a little bit of a lag before the next camera release catches up. And the fact is, nowadays, new camera sales are largely driven not by improved hardware. It used to be new sensors, but now it's mostly new software. So if Sony did give those features away for free in the A7S III and A1, it would cost them money in the product development and the distribution of that, but it would also cost them lost camera sales. And so why would they do that, right? If you're the third place company, something like Nikon or Fuji, more like fourth place, building customer loyalty really makes sense because you might be able to pull some customers over. But for the leading companies, Canon and Sony, it doesn't necessarily make sense because it's not ever going to make them money. But there is a way to solve this problem. And I was going to talk about it before I even saw the rumor on Sony Alpha Rumors, but it sounds to me like it might be coming true. Sony is going to be offering paid firmware updates. Some of these features I just talked about will be distributed to cameras like the A7S III and A1 if you're willing to pay. And I think the price they offered was like $369 or something. That sounds like a lot. People said maybe $200, but I am for this. As a software guy, I was a programmer for many years. I totally get coding takes time. Coding is worth money. We buy apps for our phone all the time. Why would we not buy features for our cameras? I would certainly prefer to spend a couple of $100 for new features than to have to get rid of an entire piece of hardware and replace it just to get a software update. Like, I know we all want stuff for free, but that is not how the world works. You have the choice of paying one way or another, and I would rather pay just for the software so I could continue to use the hardware, reduce the impact on the world, reduce the waste. What say you? Sony Alpha Rumors ran a poll, and most of you said no, you would not pay for new features. But again, your only other choice is paying for an entirely new camera. Please be open-minded about this. All of us pay for apps on our phone. We should do the same thing for features on our cameras. That will encourage camera companies to continue developing features. It could actually reduce the price of new cameras by allowing them to not charge everybody for features you don't need, like a ProRes codec or something that they'd have to pay licensing for. Split it out, create a good infrastructure for buying and installing those features. I would be all for it, but write a comment and let me know what you think. Now let's talk about DPReview, which mysteriously did not disappear. And then a few days ago, they posted an update on the status of DPReview that gave us absolutely no information. But 43rumors.com said there was a rumor that somebody inside of DPReview had negotiated purchasing terms from Amazon. They decided they would buy it and keep it running. And I don't have any inside information on this. In fact, when I've reached out to people, they haven't replied. Everybody's been extremely tight-lipped about the entire what's happening to DPReview thing, and that actually adds up with some sort of purchase. This clearly was not the initial plan, and I do kind of believe that all of you out there contacting Amazon and saying, do not delete DPReview or we will not buy cameras, I believe that might have changed Amazon's mind about whether it was worth it to put the energy in to split off this asset and sell it, because it does take a lot of work and that might not have been profitable for Amazon until they punched into their spreadsheet the number of lost camera sales and pissing off the entire photography community. And then they said, okay, maybe we should be open to offers on this. Now let's cover some leaks coming to us from MacRumors.com. The iPhone 15 Pro Max, the upgraded version of the massive iPhone smartphone here, is finally going to have a decent telephoto lens, a telescoping lens, like we've seen in the last 2 generations of the Samsung cameras. It's finally coming. They're saying it's going to be a 5:6 optical zoom, which means 120 to 144 millimeters. And it's not clear to me if it's going to actually be a zoom lens or if it's just going to be a prime lens that's somewhere in that range. But either is much better than about the 75 millimeters that we have on the current ones. That will roughly double the distance and bring faraway subjects sharper into focus. This is an area where our iPhones have lost miserably to so many different Android phones. I'm glad Apple is finally getting on it. The downside to this is it cuts more and more into the existing traditional camera market, because further reach is one of the biggest reasons people buy traditional cameras, sports and such. And once you get into 120 millimeters, well, now you can start to take better and better pictures of sports. You could even get into a little bit of light wildlife, like things like deer, bigger animals. And I think it might only be a matter of time before they can extend that reach out to 200 millimeters or so. Up next, great news for Canon shooters, Canon mirrorless shooters. Canon is finally releasing a wide-angle lens via Canon Rumors, of course. And this is a picture of the EF-M lens, their old M mount that's now discontinued. It's an 11 to 22 millimeter, which with their 1.6 crop, just what does that make it, like 18 to 35 millimeters? Canon needs this desperately because their APS-C cameras, like the R50, the R10 that we absolutely loved, they would be great vlogging cameras. They would be great travel cameras. But right now, they don't have any native super wide angle lenses, so you'd have to get an EF to RF adapter and buy an old DSLR lens, which doesn't focus quite as well. And of course, you're losing all the benefits of going mirrorless in the first place if you have to adapt a DSLR lens for your wide angle lenses. So I'm very excited to see this coming, and I can't wait to review it. Be sure to subscribe to see a review of that. Also subscribe to see the new Leica Q3 when it is released. Now, tomorrow, maybe, we will be releasing our Leica Q2 review, which I realize is very outdated because it was released in 2019, but Chelsea just recently fell in love with the Leica Q2, possibly to replace her X100V, something with better quality. So coming to us via Mirrorless Rumors, we expect this to be released in just a couple of weeks, I think near the end of May. This will have Sony's 60 megapixel sensor with stabilization. Now, it has an absolutely amazing lens on it. In our testing of the Q2, it has proven incredibly sharp and the stabilization works pretty well. It will have internal memory, so you could use an SD card for backups, or you could write just to the internal memory and then transfer it directly through a USB-C cable or through their wireless app. The rumors are also saying it's going to support wireless charging, perhaps with an external grip or perhaps not, and I'm excited to see this. This is something I've asked the camera companies for. I always charge my phone wirelessly. In fact, I only charge it wirelessly. So being able to take your traditional camera and just drop it on a wireless charging pad would be really convenient and save you having to deal with cables or taking the battery out. This new camera will have PDAF, phase detect autofocus, which should improve the focusing, which could be an issue on that 2019 camera. And it will have a tilt screen. And I'm torn about that because, I don't know, it reminds me so much of the traditional M Leica cameras, like my M10D that I use all the time, and those do not have tilt screens. So adding a tilt screen is much more forward thinking. It will certainly help you get low angles and up high, and that's kind of what I want from a travel camera. Like, I want the tilt screen, but it moves away from Leica's tradition. So neither Chelsea nor I could really decide which was better, but it will certainly be different. Here's Here's some pictures of the Leica Q3, which looks almost identical to the Leica Q2. The Leica Q2 had several special editions, such as a white and a green version. All that's leaked so far is a black version. I wouldn't be surprised if Leica waited a bit to launch their special editions. Once again, thank you to our sponsor who makes these news pieces possible. That's Squarespace. Head to squarespace.com/Tony to set up your own corner of the web that's not run by social media or anybody else. This is something you own with your own professional sounding domain. Could be your last name, the name of your business, whatever it is, it's going to sound a lot better than get me on Instagram or send an email to me@gmail.com, okay? I'm Tony@northrup.org. That gives me real independence from all the huge tech corporations, and it allows me to completely control the branding, the design, the message. On Instagram, Twitter, whatever, your competitors can take ads out on your space. You realize that, right? Here you control it. You can take appointments from clients. You can sell products. Just about anything you can imagine can happen at squarespace.com/Tony. Try it out free, no credit card. If you love it, the coupon code Tony will get you 10% off. Thank you, Squarespace. Bye.